Welcome back to Another Thing. I'm Larry Menti. Recent attacks in shopping malls across the country, here in New Jersey and around the world, have gotten the attention of national security and local law enforcement, especially as we enter the busy holiday shopping season. So are we prepared? Here to talk about that is John Comiskey, who is a criminal justice professor at Monmouth University and a retired New York City police lieutenant and an intelligence specialist. You have a long resume. Let's talk about malls. Is it at the top of the list now with national security and law enforcement as we come into the holiday shopping season?
It's on the list. What's on the list are public places. So we have a recent NTS, National Terrorism Alert System, concern in the wake of the Orlando Pulse attack and San Bernardino and our attacks in Europe, that there's a concern, a great concern, that homegrown violent extremists may do no-notice attacks in public places, and as we saw recently in Minnesota, that was the case.
I understand why you don't want to specify malls. I understand why you don't want to raise concern, but it makes sense. If you put yourself in the mind of somebody who wants to do harm coming into the holiday season, that you go to a place that is so packed, it might be difficult to keep track of somebody that may have lax security and where there's a lot of people and a lot of targets. Wouldn't that in and of itself raise it to the top of the list?
It'll go up to the top of the list yes, that's correct. Okay.
And the New York Times and some other people have talked to national security advisors about shopping malls and have talked about, especially the 2013 Paramus. We can't really call it an attack. It seemed more like it was just somebody that had some problems and was shooting at the ceiling and ended up either killing himself or be killed. But it did raise concerns because of the response to that. They didn't believe that the response was as coordinated as it should be. Can you talk more about that?
So certainly. So we had the Paramus Mall attack. What we thought was a machine attack. It came over, shots fired. There's danger. There's somebody shooting people at the mall, numerous calls. And what the after action, and what we did have as a result was the individual ended up killing himself, a self-inflicted wound. There was no engagement with the police. But what we saw from the after-action report is that we had numerous police departments from different departments, different radio dispatch, getting different 911 messages. The response, if you will, was scrambled. What many departments or agencies have done, I can speak very fluently about Monmouth County. Monmouth County's police chiefs associations and their attorney general, they got together and said, listen, we need to coordinate. We're going to create a rapid deployment force so the first people on scene are going to stabilize the scene. They're going to call some kind of central dispatch and say, this is our staging location. Do not respond to the actual location. Respond to this staging location. We'll dispatch you accordingly. We do not want that self-dispatch, so we can have a coordinated response.
At what point do the feds get involved and do they take over?
Rarely. In most cases, this is going to be a local police and state police operation. If you had a prolonged, protracted engagement, more than, say, 4 or 5 hours, you'd have more of a federal FBI special weapons and tactics teams may be made available. In large part, and for the most part, these responses are going to be local police officers with the assistance of the state police.
Let's take the attack that happened in Minnesota in the last year where a man went and allegedly was a terrorist and went around stabbing people. The feds obviously were interested in that case. So you're saying they don't take over or they don't get involved until after the incident, and then do they take over the investigation at that point?
In many cases, they will take over the investigation. So the FBI is the lead federal counterterrorism agency. So you have the Joint Terrorist Task Force that'll investigate it jointly, but ultimately them and the attorney generals will be doing the primary investigation.
So when people want to feel safe in the malls, it's their local law enforcement who is the first line of defense.
Local law enforcement and the security at the mall itself.
And do you believe the security at the malls is up to snuff?
Certainly, and in all public spaces it can be improved. In this case, what did we have? We had a citizen who happened to be an off-duty police officer who took action in Minnesota. So we were fortunate in that case.
But that can happen anywhere. So they talk about putting up cement barriers. They talk about putting up drones in Bergen County. All of these things can be used after an incident begins to happen. I would imagine that you have to stop an incident before it happens, and that's the trick. How do they do that?
Right, so you have, the idea is ultimately, the idea of Homeland Security, of policing, is to prevent bad things from happening. The drones, the CCTVs, the televisions, the barriers, if you have them, we haven't seen much of that. They're not going to prevent an attack. What's going to prevent an attack are people seeing something and saying something where it's somebody in their household or in their school or in their workplace operating unsoundly, espousing violence. Here we have almost like a triad where we have people from hate groups, from people who have mental health issues, or terrorists themselves. They typically act out in some manner or form, and ultimately it's their families, their friends, their associates, their faith-based groups that may see that. That's where the intervention needs to happen.
Thank you so much, and I'm glad you made it. John Comiskey is a criminal justice professor at Monmouth University, a retired New York City police officer, a police lieutenant, and an intelligence specialist. When we return, she is everywhere. Kellyanne Conway is the Donald Trump campaign manager. But did you know she's a Jersey girl? Dawn visits her hometown